Yeah, it happened again. It's that kind of season. I think we're here at that point of the season where nobody wins anymore. Nobody cares anymore. They've dropped their fourth straight game, the Hornets did, to the Wizards, the worst team in the league, except as Miles asked, what does that make us? What does that make the Hornets? How? Why? You see it on the screen. You see it right there. We attempt to answer those questions today, Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That does include YouTube. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Plus, you can hear him on Locked On NBA with Matt Moore and Hayes every weekday as well. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. And first, I do want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We have a Wizards loss to talk about, and it's our fourth Wizards loss of the season to talk about. Not rare, like, to say rare territory does not do it justice, Doug. It is unique territory for a team to lose to what everybody, it's factually correct record-wise, but also even vibes correct to say that the Wizards are the worst team in the league, except now if the Hornets lose to that squad 4 straight times, they would have lost a playoff series. They would have got swept by the worst team in the league if this thing were in the postseason, which this is a postseason from hell. This is what the ultimate sicko's like, but you're beyond sick if you like this kind of series. How, why, all of that. Thoughts on the game, Doug, after another loss to, the Washington Wizards?
Well, I just have to read these brutal statistics. I don't even know if these are stats, more just analysis from Kevin Pelton on Blue Sky. He writes, the Wizards swept Charlotte 4-0 in the season series. Before this season, the worst overall winning percentage by a team that swept an opponent 4-0 or better head-to-head was the 97-98 Dallas Mavericks, who went 4-0 against the Vancouver Grizzlies and 16-62 against everyone else. At 7-48 against teams besides Charlotte, the Wizards will probably smash that record, but 4 of 11 total wins is not the highest percentage against a single opponent, even in modern history. In 93-94, Dallas got 5 of its 13 wins against the Minnesota Timberwolves, going 5-1 head-to-head. They played 6 games against each other. The highest percentage of total wins against a single opponent comes from the 70-71 season, when the NBA had 3 expansion teams play each other 12 times. Cleveland went 7-5 against Buffalo, nearly half of the Cavaliers' 15 total wins. So there you go. That's as obscure as it gets, folks.
Yeah.
But it's just rare what the Hornets are doing. Only happened a couple of times in NBA history.
Oh, you want more? You want more stats? I got them for you. Don't worry. Charlotte is now 2-8 in their last 10 games against the Wizards. That's right, 2-8 in their last 10 games. Charlotte is now 1-5, or excuse me, they were 2-6 against them the last 2 seasons coming into this game. Now they're 2-6, 2-6 coming in to the last 2 seasons. Charlotte had been coming into that game responsible for 22% of Washington's win total since the 23-24 season. Oh, now it's like, I don't know, 26 or something stupid. It's ridiculous. Like, so I don't know why, Doug, it keeps happening, but the Hornets just aren't ready to play Washington whatsoever. The thing is, we were able to find some light in the last episode with Mark Williams and his performance. Mark, the box score again, like Mark seems to be giving you something in terms of a leg to stand on to defend what he possibly could be. Like, these box scores look like what it felt like when Mark was playing well. Right after that injury, he gave you 24 points against Washington, 11 of 14. That's more like it. Like, damn near going perfect from the field in some of these other games on high volume where he's just real efficient. 12 rebounds, 3 assists. a couple blocks too. So it's not like you didn't have any redeeming quality about this game, but you can't lose to Washington, have 80% of your starting lineup out there and feel good. You just can't do it. And now here we are at the end of the season where, God almighty, like you're either losing by 130 in a 3-game span, 140 in a 4-game span, or you're losing to Washington. I said it when I went solo, Doug. You just can't pick where the wins are coming from, and that's wildly frustrating.
Yeah, 24 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists for Mark Williams, 11 of 14 from the field, 3 stocks, 3 turnovers. That's not great, but a lot of people were turning the basketball over in this game. That was a huge problem in the third quarter. The Hornets actually had a lead at halftime, which they completely gave away in the third quarter. Some of that was LaMelo Ball. I mean, a couple of crucial turnovers in that third quarter, and he had a weird game because he scored 20.7 rebounds. He's actually 5th on the team in game score because of the 4 fouls and the 6 turnovers that killed a lot of the other momentum. Also, 5 of 13 from 3, 38%, but that's a lot of missed shots there too. Miles Bridges second in game score. Josh Green, Damian Baugh actually slightly above LaMelo Ball in game score because he had 3 steals and a block to go with 5 points, 5 rebounds. But just never really felt like the Hornets had much control over this game. And it's the same stuff, man. It's just turnovers that allowed Washington to get out into transition. Washington happened to get better as a team, just personnel-wise, at the deadline.
Yeah.
They added Chris Middleton. They added Marcus Smart. And, Alex Sarr did not have a great game. I thought that's where Mark was able to do most of the damage. Rashawn Holmes did have a good game, 15 points, 9 rebounds. I thought Mark looked good. I'm not sure I'd really say that anyone else looked. I mean, Miles, 18, 8, and 7. That's not a terrible game from Miles. It's a weird one. They just weren't ready defensively, particularly in the second half. And Washington wanted it, and Charlotte didn't. And I think that's where Charlotte is right now. They don't want it.
Yeah,
Mark, I think, wants it individually because of how the trade that went down. But nobody else seems to want it.
Which is good, right? Like, I mean, how many shows this year do you think Mark has been the primary topic? You think like 35% of our shows during the regular season, he's been A-block material and everybody else comes secondary. Wait, LaMelo was holding that down for a large portion of the beginning of the season. But yeah, I mean, Mark is the only redeeming thing about this game, and Miles, as you mentioned, but that's about it. And I'm glad that Mark is showing you something, right? Because we all said, hey, if there is a fire in Mark, if there is something able to be sparked, then this is the type of situation that would spark that fire in him. And there were still bad games after that whole trade debacle. In fact, it was looking pretty rough, but now he's starting to bounce back a little bit more with a couple of nice outings. I think he's getting more comfortable offensively, which is a huge deal. You're talking about him becoming a little more efficient. But yeah, it feels all for naught, right? When you lose to Washington. And so now trying to figure out where the good stuff is going to come from this team. You don't even know if LaMelo is going to play, which is frustrating. When LaMelo does play, they have 80% of their starters out there, and they're still losing to the worst team. You are right. It is fair context to provide Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart are now on this squad. Those are winning players. I don't like, yeah, you should still beat Washington, but if you get 2 winning players that just help your culture, ultimate culture guys, okay, we should acknowledge that. It is not the Wizards team that beat you the previous 3 times, but or even the first 2. But yeah, it's still wildly frustrating for every Hornets fan that is looking for an excuse to come out and support the Hornets tonight outside of Steph Curry. Like, other than that, you're going to see a lot of Davidson jerseys in Spectrum Center tonight because that's who they're going to be there for. It's tough, man. I don't want it to be like this, but here we are, and it's taking a nosedive, falling off a cliff, whatever you want to use to say that this season is completely out the window.
Well, yeah, because I think these games would be different if LaMelo Ball were having like excellent games and everyone around him were falling off. I think people would look at it and go, well, there's not enough talent around LaMelo, but LaMelo looks awesome. So once everybody else gets healthy, they rejoin LaMelo. I think part of the despair, part of the reason people are tuning out is because LaMelo has struggled in a lot of these games. And if he look, they get outscored 30-16 in that third quarter, and LaMelo comes out in out of half, scores a 3, and then the Wizards go on like a 10-0 run, and then they get a couple more shots to go down, and then the Wizards get an 11-point advantage. And it's like by that time the game seemed to be like completely over. It was totally in the Wizards' control. And so, I don't know. It's if you can't beat the Wizards, I don't know who you can beat at this point. And it is demoralizing. The team that I think we fell in love with at the beginning of the season because of injuries, because of just never really being able to find a rhythm, has just completely fallen away. And I do think it does call for some serious reevaluation in the offseason.
Oh, yeah, and we've been there, but you're right. That you can just continue to enhance that argument with losses to Washington every single time you play them. Let's still talk about it. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
I do want to talk about the state of the Hornets, fans checking out. With us having a pretty decent pulse on the Hornets fan base, I want to discuss everybody's feelings surrounding Charlotte right now. We'll get to that in just a moment right here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, I'm interested in your opinion on like the state of the Hornets, where the Hornets fan base is right now. One thing I've always given credit to the Hornets fan base for is they show up if you give them something to cheer for, and they show up a lot of times even if you don't give them something to cheer for. The best the Spectrum Center has ever been on a consistent basis, recently I should say, was a couple of years ago when Charlotte was playing above 500 basketball. LaMelo was Showtime, was playing like Magic Johnson with the passes, and they got to a play-in tournament. The Spectrum Center was showing out there. I forget what the attendance record was, or the attendance, how it compared to every other NBA team, but it was pretty good. You see the environment get up for a big-time moment like the one that they had against the Spurs, right? I know a lot of people are there for Wemby. They're also there to cheer on the Hornets if LaMelo kicks it out to Miles and he drains an open 3 for the win. Essentially, it's going to sound loud. Like, people are going to feel like they're at a big-time important NBA game. I will say, off of that, we're starting to see the decrease in intrigue, in interest, and it's completely understandable. You have that one against San Antonio. You have that one against the Lakers. We all wanted that one. Lots of people pissed off at Rob Pelinka and company. We wanted to see Mark play well. They got the win. LaMelo made winning time plays in the last 3 minutes. That's great. They've lost every game since, and they've lost a bunch of games in like just ugly, ugly ways, to the point where they're setting records for how bad they're losing to this team. To these teams, which is a great way for your season to just completely go in the dumpster. That's how you do it. And now it feels like they're playing like that. So you can't point to the wins anywhere. You have your starters, so now the injuries excuse, it's not as strong as it once was. You feel like they're giving up, so now you're giving up. And it feels, Doug, like the difference between this year compared to other years, it feels like the rug was pulled out from under us. And when things this badly happen unexpectedly, we have a harder time dealing with it. And I think that happened here, right? Like, they weren't getting beat by 20 points every single game. They would fight in the second half, and we'd be here to acknowledge that. We'd be here to cheer for that. You said it. They didn't have control of the game the whole time against Washington. I felt the same exact way you did. You mentioned that. I was like, yeah, I had the same feelings. I did not expect them to win that game. They didn't have control over it. And so now here we are where the rug is pulled out from under us. We're building. Now we're losing 3 games by 130 points. It's the unexpected of it all, I think, that makes this season, the end of this season, hurt a little more for me, Doug, than it does other seasons. And I think the Hornets fans feel something similar to what I do.
Yeah, I think the Wizards is an interesting contrast because they did add those serious veterans that I mentioned, particularly Chris Middleton, like serious players. And so while
and Marcus Smart is serious as hell.
Marcus Smart is very serious. Yeah, very serious on the defensive end, but sometimes too serious.
Yeah, that's right.
They want to win, and they know how to win. They've been on teams that know how to win. And so even though they have the worst record, I think their mentality is a lot better. And you mentioned the Lakers game. I mean, I think that's a case where everyone in the locker room had something to play for, and they decided to play for it.
Yeah.
And the problem is they have not been able to generate whatever that thing is for a game against the Wizards in front of the home fans. And I don't know that you can really salvage that in the middle of the season. And it's probably part of that is that they did turn the tank on early. And look, if they get the number 1 overall pick, then I think we'll be looking back at all of this pain and going, all right, well, they did the right thing. It hurt. It hurt a lot, but they did the right thing. But when you turn the tank on early, even some of your better players, I think, are going to look around and go, okay, I know what the deal is. I'm going to be on injury management now. I'm not going to play on back-to-backs. We've lost that seriousness. And I think also when you have a young coach who comes in and lays down a lot of like rules and a lot of discipline and says, here's how we're going to do things. It's going to be different. And then halfway through the season, you turn the tank on. It's tough. I think that's a tough thing to square, and why I think, you really got to reevaluate this roster top to bottom when you get into the offseason and decide which players are. And I think Nada is onto something like when he was on last week, like which players are culture players and which ones aren't. That was always really going to be the evaluation. I think there was going to be some idea of like what's going to work for us strategically. What do we need? What do we not need? Just sort of stuff on the basketball floor. But I think most of the evaluation in my mind was going to be on which players are going to really embrace what Hornets DNA means and which ones aren't. And unfortunately for the Hornets, like so many of those players that did embrace that are injured, like Grant Williams, I think Trey Mann, so many players that would have contributed to like, hey, we are in some adversity right now, and I'm going to help pull us through. Those guys are out, so it's difficult. Yeah. It's not impossible to make evaluations, but and I do look at the best player on this team in LaMelo and say this guy's not playing up to his potential. Is that the ankle? I don't know. But he's not playing up to his potential. And I think a team is going to take on some of that, and then a fan base is going to take on some of that, because it's all about belief that you're going to see a good product, belief that you're going to see something exciting, belief that your best player is going to play his best. I look at New Orleans, they're kind of in a similar situation. They've had a hell season injury-wise, but they've got Zion Williamson, win or lose, and they've been doing their fair share of losing in New Orleans. Win or lose, Zion Williamson has been playing like out of this world basketball. That, to me, that's the difference.
There are so many different things, right? Because you're not wrong about any of that. You mentioned if you get Cooper Flagg, then it's the right choice to turn on the tank early. And you want to have Cooper Flagg. You want to have the best player as possible, right? As much as possible. When people discuss the detriment of tanking, providing a losing culture, this is what it looks like, though. When you lose to the worst team constantly, when you're losing all these other games and you're not showing a lot of fight in the second half, would you rather not have Cooper Flagg and instead end up with the 4th or 5th overall pick? Let's not even give you Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey. You end up with Edgecombe or Queen or whoever it is at 4 or 5, and you don't lose like that, right? Because now what you're doing is you're gaining one player that isn't experiencing this in the lottery, whoever you select as a rookie, but you might be losing a lot of the other players that were on the fence on if they could contribute. And then this is what I talk about last episode as well, when you are the team that provides the environment conducive to winning. You are the team that provides the ecosystem that allows people to compete every single night and play with whatever tagline you want to roll with. If you're James Borrego, competitive spirit. If you're Charles Lee, competitive joy. I need to see that from somebody. And if you continue to lose at this rate, where now everybody's checked out and you have the 50-50 guys that are checked out because it's just too hard, right? It's just too hard. You can go to a different winning team and now everybody can see exactly what you bring to the floor every single night. And we've gone through a couple of players that have turned it on, or not even turned it on, just realized their potential in winning environments because those environments bring out the best in their players. This is where I'm starting to be at my wit's end of the team, right? It's just continuing to see the environment not be provided. That's my issue. And whether it's as talented of a player as LaMelo, who everybody owns their own issues, and LaMelo needs to own his issues right now, injuries or not, whether it's LaMelo, whether it's Mark Williams, whether it's Nick Smith Jr., whatever different, not to pick on anybody, it's just these are the different stages of players that I'm going through that are on the roster. Whoever you are, if you're losing all of these guys that have talent, this is my frustration with the team, because it doesn't matter what the regime is, the head coach is. We keep seeing this, Doug, and that's the issue.
There's two main things going on right now. One is that your best players aren't playing their best. And two, you're playing like 3 or 4 guys on a night in and night out basis that are not legitimate NBA rotation players, okay? If both of those things are the case, you lose 4 games to the Wizards and you get blown out by 20 plus by everybody else. If one of those things is not the case, if your best players are playing at their best and you've got 3 or 4 NBA, non-NBA rotation players, then you probably lose by 5, but you're competitive the entire game. If your best players aren't playing their best, but you've got NBA rotation guys all across the board that would be NBA rotation guys on other rosters, then you probably lose by 5, but you're competitive the whole way. But the Hornets' problem is that they have both of those things going on at the same time. And so that's where I think, to me, when I say you've got to reevaluate the roster top to bottom, it's because your top's not playing top and your bottom is too bad. Like you got to raise that bottom and then figure out if the top is not playing like the top because of injury or because they just don't have what it takes to like lift a bad basketball team and make them a better basketball team.
All right, we got one more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
We'll rummage through the sicko satchel. Doug has a question that he's excited for. That's still to come here, LOH. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Here are a few ways you can take advantage of that deal. You could have the game day feast after an epic 50-point performance. You could celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. You could get lunch on the go if you need a quick and easy lunch the next day with Dash Pass. You get your favorite meals with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees. Plus now you can even save more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, Doug, let's go to the sicko satchel. Is there any fun? Can we find any comedy, any fun, any joy? Search hard for the rainbows at the bottom of that sicko satchel, please.
But before I do that, I just have to comment on the beginning of the fourth quarter of this game against the Wizards, okay? Let's paint the picture for you because I'm not sure that many people watched it. The Hornets, they're down 10 points. That's not you could be down 20 going into the fourth quarter in an NBA game. You can come back. That's how the NBA is. No lead is safe until you get like halfway through the fourth quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Daquan Jeffries makes this move towards the rim and realizes that he's off balance. He's not close enough to the rim to make the layup. And he just yeets it backwards. No intention, no idea what he's doing there. And turnover, get into transition. Everybody's kind of jogging back. Mark is jogging back. No one gets out on the wing to Marcus Smart. That's a three-pointer. Next play, you get it to Mark Williams. He's on the left block. He's up against Rashawn Holmes. He travels. And then I think there's a three right after. No, it was a Marcus Smart layup after that. It's just like, again, you're just like you're doing this thing where you're like rubbing your temples. You're like, what was the plan? What was the idea? What did you want to do there to open the fourth quarter? Because whatever you wanted to do, you got so far away from that, and the Wizards were just ready to jump. And if I see Corey Kispert one more time, I'm going to lose it.
If I see any of them, I'm going to lose it. I don't want to see any of them. I don't want to see a wizard. I don't want to see a wand. I don't want to see Gandalf. I don't want to see a funny hat. I don't want to see anything magic. I don't want to read Harry Potter. I don't want to see anything to do with the Wizards anymore. Doug, let's go to the Sicko Satchel.
Hallie of the 12th Dwight Howard Division asks this. Do you think they can still say, the franchise can still say, they have gotten a fair evaluation due to the injuries? I kind of feel like you can't lean into that anymore. You just have to make a change.
No, I don't. I don't think that you can say that you got a full fair evaluation. You got some. Maybe you got one for the first half of the season, but part of the environment that I talk about is just having talent where everybody else is able to play their role. So you as a player can play your role. And if you can, and look, that's even true of the top guys. Like LaMelo is your best player, but there's things that he can't do. Now you're asking him, just like we were defending him in the first half of the season when he's throwing up all these shots because he can't pass to anybody. It's even true there. So I wouldn't even say the first half you could fairly evaluate on a large sample size. The answer to that question is no, and I feel pretty confident, Doug. Like, if you have players that do their role and you have this vision of a puzzle piece, a winning puzzle put together, well, then everybody is responsible for what they're supposed to be doing, right? Brandon Miller's out after the first 7 minutes of that game against Houston. Not even the first 2. I'm sorry. I gave him 5 extra minutes to start the season. He was out after the first 2. So, no, I don't think you can still get enough to where maybe you can feel like they're leaning one way or the other for sure. But can you get a full, fair evaluation on what these guys can do? No, there's still some uncertainty with everybody.
The answer is no, you cannot get a fair evaluation. And the answer is also, it doesn't matter because they're going to have to operate on an unfair evaluation. They cannot continue down this path with this kind of losing, this level of losing, while asking ticket holders to pay more and more. Everyone was rightly laughing at the sign from, Dilworth Grill?
Yes, they're
losing 3 games by 130 points. Tickets should be free. Well, tickets aren't free. They're going up. Like they're charging season ticket holders more for a product that I think is fairly described as miserable. And so they cannot continue down this path. So they have to make unfair evaluations. Like obviously, I don't think they're going to move on from Brandon Miller. Like that injury was unfortunate. They're going to continue down that path and see what they have. But I think the trading of Mark Williams was a preview of the attitude that they're going to take with this team, which is like they traded Mark Williams and he was coming off an injury, and that was an unfair evaluation, right? I don't know that they got enough, they didn't give him a full season to kind of show what he could do and then make that decision in the offseason. No, they were ready to pounce when there was opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunity is not only this offseason, the opportunity is not only going to be what assets can we bring back. I think the opportunity for this team is going to be how much can we add by subtracting? How much can we add by changing?
And you bring up Mark Williams. They moved off of Mark once they deemed the return enough of a return to move off of the risk that he actually is a franchise player, right? So everybody has a different price. And when we go to the ultimate example being LaMelo, what is that price to move off of LaMelo because you just don't deem it worth it anymore and you just rather have the return? Because to me, it's still pretty high, but I don't know what it is for Jeff Peterson and this regime who didn't give LaMelo the immediate $200 million max. Now, like it is funny, that contract for LaMelo actually it doesn't look bad as the CBA continues to expand and you see all these other players getting a lot of money. It's still a lot, but he's not even at 40 yet, right? Like, so that is interesting. But at the same time, this is a different regime, and it's a different LaMelo. That's the other part of this. Right? This regime could have liked LaMelo coming into the season and absolutely loved him, but now you're talking about a different LaMelo with all the other injuries that he's had. You have any other Sicko Satchel questions and any other points before we move on?
No. Well, I do have another Sicko Satchel question, but I want to give it time. We keep delaying it because stuff keeps happening. But I do want to get to the Schumann question from the 22nd Mullins Regiment about how this team would match up the injury lineups where you have no LaMelo, no Mark, Grant, Trey Mann, Brandon Miller against the 2012 Bobcats, and it's really just a selfish opportunity for us to relive the names of the 2012 Bobcats. But
yep.
I want to give this its proper time. There will be time for this. My final point on the LaMelo contract is I'm just really curious how that's viewed across the league. Is that because I understand what you're saying about it, we'll see where the salary cap lands after this season and do they smooth it out? Because I remember like the last TV deal, the jump was so dramatic. It ended up with like role players getting way too much money and it like effed over a lot of teams that had invested way too much and guys that shouldn't have been because there was so much cap available for guys and I think they worked that out now where it's smoothed out. So I just wonder how that contract is viewed across the league. If it's viewed as a good as underwater because he's had 0 playoff games because of the injuries. If that's going to be a difficult contract to move and if it will suppress the value. My instinct on it is yes. That you're going to have to be more realistic about what you get back with LaMelo unless you don't want to move on from him at all.
Which is kind of my point, which for me, like we'll have this conversation a bunch, but his contract is like 38th in the league next year in terms of how much he's getting. So yeah, it's actually 41st. So he's making $38 million next year. That's basically tied for 41st in the league. He's 38th the year after that. You're going to be in the late 30s, early 40s in terms of how you rank as a player. If you go to the Ringer, which it's not gospel, but if you go to the Ringer NBA player rankings, guess where he was? Wasn't he 38th or 37th in the asset rankings? So I guess my point is, like, where he is right now, it's a fair contract still, except that he's not playing, which it all comes down to the injury, and which is the subject of this whole conversation. It's, are you willing to deal with those injuries or risk dealing with those injuries because the juice just isn't worth the squeeze anymore? The squeeze being the pain of him missing out on 50 games the last 3 years and more. And that's a tough squeeze. There's no doubt. And if they choose to make that choice, then yeah, I understand it. I do understand it.
I think what the choice is going to come down to, Walker, is do you want to move on from LaMelo Ball sooner rather than later, even if it means you take less back so that you can move the franchise in a different direction immediately? Or do you want to roll the dice and hope that you come out of the gates next season with everyone healthy and LaMelo Ball playing the same way that he played and staying healthy through the trade deadline and then maximize the value at the trade deadline, or convince you that it's actually worthy, depending on their record. Like if their record is moving in a playoff direction, then maybe it would change their minds completely and say, no, actually this thing can work with Brandon healthy, with LaMelo healthy, with Miles, with Grant, with Trey, and we just want to see where this goes.
Or just
but you give
LaMelo,
yourself
right?
Options and a chance to maximize the trade return if that were to be the case.
100%. That's the question. That's going to be the biggest question we talk about in a bunch of different ways, is everything you just laid out. Even without the other players, to be honest with you, it's really just about LaMelo. As much as I love Grant coming back and serving his role, he's not the ultimate question going into next year. He's a question, but LaMelo is the guy, and everything you just laid out. That's what the Hornets have to figure out, and it could go either way, man. Like, it really could go either way. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. I apologize. We could not find the fun in the Seiko satchel. It was a dark cloud. He pulled out a whole bunch of rain, is what Doug pulled out, a bunch of thunder and lightning. But we will be back with you to continue to look for the fun on the other side of this. It's Locked On Hornets. It's Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com, Locked On NBA as well. You can find him there with Hayes and Matt Moore. And I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.